Hello folks, hope you're doing well. Welcome back to another One Piece review. This time we're covering manga chapter 1168. So Oda looks like he's gradually tying this King Harold Loki backstory up for the end of the year. But before I dive into this chapter, however, it would be an absolute crime if I didn't talk about the masterpiece that was episode 151. A fantastic, grade A, S tier, chef's kiss episode, a magnificent, well put together episode. Honestly, there have been very rare episodes this year, and I get it because we've had a 6-month break. I was already looking forward to this episode due to what we got in the manga, but I can honestly say this is probably by far the way. I know it's going to be subjective because a lot of people didn't like this moment for Bonney becoming Gear 5th, but I can honestly say this was my favourite episode of 2025, not even close. It wasn't about the power scaling, which is a lot of people, while a lot of people are still whining to this day. And I pointed this out when I covered this in the manga, and I'm going to point it here. The way this was all set out, the way how Oda set this moment up, the moment that Bonney interacted with Luffy, and from then on forth, it was building towards this moment. Everything from that point was building to this moment for Bonney. A lot of those come from the Kuma backstory, which only added to this moment. I find it very interesting that 80 episodes after the initial episode where we first got introduced to Gear 5th Luffy, they came up with this masterpiece in episode 1151, where everything was built up, set up for Bonney perfectly. A lot of the traits that we got when Luffy went into Gear 5th for the first time, in not only the manga but also in the anime, was kind of like echoed in this episode. You have the ship on elbaph, quote unquote, catch on fire, but that was done to highlight the background because of obviously the fire representing the sun god Nika. On top of that, not only do you have Bonney standing in front of the fire, you literally had the giants doing the Nika dance while Luffy is coaching on Bonney. You can do it too, go free. Then you had the drums of liberation kicking in. You even had Ema underwater come back to life, quote unquote, to like, the Nikas have returned. Joy Boy have returned. We got that echoed from what we got with Zunisha, how he said, "Oh, Joy Boy, you've returned." Obviously referred to Luffy. So here we got with Bonney. Even the ship began to change with the Luffy's Devil Fruit Awakening, but it was all to highlight the moment for Bonney. Like everything was perfectly laid out. And speaking of which, not to jump ahead, but in this chapter, there is a scene where we see Pangea Castle. And I don't know if it was just me, but it looked like in one scene, like the Pangea Castle was kind of like affected by Devil Fruit Awakening. I just thought that was kind of weird. It took me a while to figure out what Luffy was trying to get Sanji, Frankie, and Bonney to do, but no, because it'd been so long since I read this in the manga, Luffy needed to coach them to hit him with the strongest attack, so he could pull a Tank Man and use those attacks back to deflect it on Saint Mars. Saint Mars, you are out of here. But that's not the only Gorosei. It's going to be sent packing very soon. That we're even going to get another moment involving Bonney pretty soon. That's just as epic, but it's going to be centered around more emotion than anything else. The animation was great. You even had that Atoshi Shida is tried and true, right? Animating the water with Emot coming out the water to like punch Top Man to end the episode. So I want to jump ahead because we do have a scene involving Joy Boy's hockey, which by itself could be an epic moment, but I'm sticking to my guns. I feel like this was the best episode all year. I mean, you can debate that if you want, that's fine, but for me personally, it's going to be very hard for episodes to top this as far as Egghead. I thought this was one of the best chapters of the Egghead Island arc. I really enjoyed the chapter. The anime went above and beyond. They amped it up a notch by 1,000. And I knew they were going to hit it out of the park with this moment, but when it comes to like all the other moments that they animated this year, I don't think they've hit as hard as this episode here. Speaking of Joy Boy Loki, we actually got to hear Joy Boy's voice actor for the first time, so that was kind of cool because we're going to get that pretty soon. And Joy Boy's how he looks in the past, so that's also going to be a big moment. But you can tell the anime, they adapted 2 chapters into 1 episode, going for like ending the year off with Egghead Island and starting the year off when they get to it with elbaph. So let's get into this chapter, and I will say the 2 things I appreciate about this chapter the most is we got an explanation as to the symbolism of the marking on the Holy Knights, as well as the pentagram, or I guess the magic circle, and what the deal is with that, which is questions I've been asking. Oda trying to wrap up the Loki and King Harold backstory, chapter where Oda is literally painting the picture of the ending of this flashback, literally. So on the cover of Quest, we got Hachi with a bunch of black sheep. So, and obviously, much like the remaining chapters of the year, it's like obvious, like Oda's trying to hang on to like use the remainder of this year to wrap up this flashback so he can open up the Straw Hats in the present. That's what he's doing with his cover requests. I feel like he's going to open up 2026 with a bang when it comes to like giving us a new cover story. At this point, I wouldn't mind seeing a Big Mom children's cover story, because we don't know what's going to happen with Katakuri and Smoothie. Now, I did say they could possibly go off and try and rescue Pudding, but if that's not in the cards, then I can also see this being a way for Oda to like give some closure towards Pudding and Sanji. I still think there's unfinished business there, so that could be where Oda's going as well. Let's start off the chapter with, I guess, the press or the journalism being spread about the heroism of King Harold, how things have changed now for King Harold and the rest of Elbaph. So, following this, we go to King Harold since the passing of Ida. So, we do get somewhat of a flashback. We see Warrior's School has been opened up, which is what we can see in the present. Out of the flashback, we know what's going on in the present. But then Sol asks King Harold a very important question here, and I think it kind of goes under the radar, because Sol asks King Harold, aren't you afraid you've lost something here, Harold? But then Harold responds, I don't believe military power is what makes a country strong anymore. It's because of Ida. She taught me everything. Meeting her was the greatest blessing of my life. Which is true, but the thing is, he's kind of lost the point here, because in the flashback, Ida is like, Elbaph has changed a lot. When I first came here, there were tons of internal conflict. It was scary, but you changed everything. But that was because of Ida. But Harold goes on to say that all customs of our backwards traditions, all of those bad practices from the warrior era will be thrown away. But Ida, being the best character in this entire flashback, says, oh, but I kind of like that whole warrior's pride part. It's really cool. But even though she kind of like scolded Harold when they first met for like thinking he was above everybody else because he thought he was strong because coming from Elbaph. But here it's like, oh, I kind of dig that whole warrior's pride. Now, I'm sure that has to do with King Harold and the fact that Ida, again, the best character in this entire flashback. You should cherish your culture, which goes against exactly what Harold was looking for in the first place when he told Elbaph, listen, we can change our image, we can forge alliances with the rest of the world whilst maintaining our warrior's pride. That's what he said to the rest of Elbaph, but along the way, he lost that ideology. So then this conversation steers towards Loki, because King Harold, what about Loki? He'll always be Haradin's kid brother, won't he? But then Ida responds, in my heart, I've always thought of him like that. The feelings like that keep my heart full. It's what keeps me going all this time. So it's that thought alone that's kept her pushing, despite the fact she was poisoned. But following this, she ends up passing away, succumbing to the illness. And interesting, Harold leaves, King Haradin enters, and Loki's locked up. So then it cuts to 14 years ago. 14 years ago to the incident. So Shanks is missing from the Holy Land. Oh, gee, what a shocker. But they got to say Shanks is missing indeed. Had he completed his last mission, he would have been formally knighted. But for someone who was actually like the son of Figalan Garling to not give him preferential treatment. Speaking of the Holy Knights, we got King Harold interacting with the Gorosei. So they go on to say, since Shanks missed out on that opportunity falls with Liu to become an official Holy Knight. And King Harold, of course, is going on with this. So he's already made that pledge. He's lost Ida. He only has King Harold and Loki. But then he goes on to say, okay, I accept. Then the Gorosei go on to say, the Great One has agreed to trust in you. It's been a long process. You'll be remembered as a king who brought great change to Elbaph. So the King Harold goes on to say, once Elbaph finally joins the world government, I'm going to dip. I'm going to relinquish my throne. A younger, more virtuous ruler than I should take over. Now, who's he referring to? It could either be referring to Haradin or Loki. And considering Loki was a target, maybe it's Loki, but I also seem to think it was Haradin just because of what the situation involving Ida. We don't really know. Loki's locked up at this point, so it wouldn't surprise me if it was Haradin he had in mind. But as he says this, Jupiter has this look on his face like, yeah, about that. He goes, and we get King Harold pulling a King Cobra moment because he enters the throne room and sees Ibu for the first time. It's like, wait a minute, why is someone sitting on this throne? Ibu's like, I've been watching thee, Harold, all this time. Of course you have. Literally, King Harold gets Ibu's stamp of approval. Literally. It's stamped on his arm. And apparently this is the mark of immortality that all official Holy Knights, quote-unquote, have. I'm going to get to that because this is going to tie into my point by the end. So according to St. Mars, this is the power of immortality. Imu tops it off, consider thyself an immortal knight, sworn to Imu. Then Imu goes on to say, carve an abyss pentagram in elbaph that will mark the bond between us. In other words, the magic circle that was used to summon the Holy Knights. So finally, Oda gives us an explanation about what these circles mean and how these come about. It is a simple answer, but I appreciate it because finally we get some context. So, the abyss pentagram in elbaph that summons Holy Knights, but we know there's something different about Gunko because Gunko apparently is the only Holy Knight that can summon other Holy Knights. Shamrock was summoned back. So, remember, Shamrock dipped to substitute for St. Summers and St. Killingham because apparently Shamrock was needed on the Holy Land. We still don't know what's going on with that. So, King Harold is like, gung-ho, his wish is finally being granted. We go back to Horus Castle with King Harold and Imu communicating via the pentagram. So, Imu is telling Harold, mobilize the entire nation and form a grand army of warriors. The giant warrior fleet will stand alongside the Marines, who, by the way, we got giants as the Marines anyhow, and serve the world. Harold's like panicking, like, wait, everything I was done was to free elbaph from violence. But I'm like, that was kind of naive. But of course, if anybody still wishes to fight, I'll gladly encourage them to enlist in the Marines, which is what I just said. Like, we got giants becoming Marines anyway. So, but it's not enough for Imu. Apparently, Imu wants a private militia formed of warriors from elbaph, which is exactly what Imu has in the present. So it makes sense. So King Harold fucks up here because they're like, I can't do that with you. But then Imu is like, thou vowed to atone for elbaph's sins by even at the cost of becoming a slave. And I told you those words would come back to backfire and bite King Harold in the ass because that's exactly what King Harold said. So he's getting his wish, but this is not what he wanted. And now he's realizing the fuck up he made because the marking of Imu on King Harold begins controlling him. So Imu goes on to say, those who enter into a deep sea conveyancy contract may gain immortality and power, but it comes at a cost, the cost of total obedience. So thou will carry Imu's orders. So he's losing his own free will. Boy, where have we seen that before?
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
Because now he realizes they've never meant for it to become part of the fold. Tools for the world government to use in this grand scheme of Imu. So, welcome to reality, King Harold. Sometimes you have to learn the hard way. The only ones I feel sorry for in the King Harold backstory is Loki, Ida, and Haradin. Outside of Eris, Sebek, and Teach, to some extent, this could have been prevented. So, this sets up the scene because King Harold is losing control. He's telling the guards, chain me to this pillar, summon Jarl and my sons, plural sons. But then they go on to say, I believe Haradin is still out at sea. Harold is like, I can't resist for long. Like, release the felons, bring that motherfucker out to take me out. We see panels of Loki and Jarl. And then Oda decides to end this chapter with a portrait of King Harold saying, the day of the castle massacre when the elbaf's most beloved king, Harold the Benevolent, lost his life. So Oda is going to end 2025 with the reveal of what went down, which at this point we kind of think, I mean, it's kind of obvious what went down. So, and it makes sense of why it happened inside Horus Castle, which is my biggest question. why did it happen in Oda's castle when nobody was allowed to step foot? Now it makes sense because King Harold did that. But everything in the kitchen sink is laid out for this predictable outcome involving King Harold and Loki. Because of Oda giving us expansion on the marking and what it represents, and by and large, now it makes perfect sense why Shanks and Teach have it out for one another. Look who killed, even though it was underhanded as fuck, look who killed Zebek. And look what we got in the present, involving the animosity involving Shanks and Teach. I'll leave it at that. All in all, I thought it was an okay chapter. Very simplistic considering we knew the scenario was going to play itself out. But the fact that Oda is like giving us the portrait of King Harold, which was my point to begin with. Why would he have Harold's appearance silhouetted when he was quote unquote shish kebabbed at the beginning of this flashback if it's not leading to reverse Idami in some way, shape or form? That could be a possibility. I don't think people are going to be too happy with that, but it doesn't even matter at this point because he's still being manipulated by Emu. So what difference does it make at this point? So let me know you guys down below. We got to talk about emotion. Look, we got a lot of emotion coming our way in 2026. And I'm pretty sure with Jump Festa around the corner, Oda's going to tease what's to come. So it looks like Oda's going to finally wrap up this flashback within the next chapter. So let me know you guys think down below. If you enjoyed this video, you guys know what to do. Hit that thumbs up. I appreciate that. I appreciate all you guys' support when it comes to these One Piece reviews. Take it easy, guys. Bye.